Welcome to another episode of Hive Mind Headlines, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and stories shaping the learning across the district. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Tranberg, proud superintendent of the Branford Public Schools. One of the most common questions we ask young people is, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's a simple question, but for many of us, the answer changes over time, shaped by the people who inspire us, the experiences that challenge us, and the passions that begin to take root along the way. In today's episode, we're exploring education, not just as a profession, but as a pathway, one built on purpose, connection, and the opportunity to make a lasting impact on others. You'll hear from Branford's current Educator of the Year about the journey that led them into the classroom, the moments that continue to fuel their passion, and the responsibility and joy that come with shaping the next generation. We'll also hear from a recent Branford High School graduate who is considering pursuing education in college, offering a fresh perspective on why teaching still matters in today's world. Together, these stories invite us to reflect not only on careers in education, but on the bigger question behind them. What do we want to become, and who helped us get there? Thanks for joining us. This is Hive Mind Headlines. Let's dive in. Our first guest is Branford High School science teacher and our current Branford Educator of the Year, Vicki Clymey. Welcome to the podcast, Vicki.
Thank you for having me here. This is pretty exciting. It's my first podcast.
I am so glad you're here, and I hope you enjoy being on podcasts. It's pretty fun. So can you tell us a little bit? I know you didn't have the most traditional path. When did you decide you wanted to become an educator, and what inspired that decision?
Yeah, I think if you talk to any teacher that you've had or any teacher that your children have, you're going to get a slightly different pathway as to how people eventually find their calling and come into teaching. So I started thinking I wanted to go into the medical field and maybe be an optometrist. That was actually my vision, and I was all lined up, actually accepted into graduate school to go to optometry school. And I started to feel like it wasn't going to be the right place for me. So I deferred for graduate school for a year and thought, well, I'll give myself a year and try a couple different things out. And I ended up interning at the Philadelphia Zoo. I lived in Philadelphia at the time after college. And I started in the children's zoo. And I knew in the first week that I was there that I had really struck something that was the right place for me to be. So I interned, which is essentially working for free, for over a year in the children's zoo. So working within the children's zoo, there's all kinds of different animals that are there. You had, of course, some domesticated animals, but I also had birds of prey, and we would do a lot of educational shows. So we were a division of the education department. And I just really started to enjoy interacting with school groups when they came, or just public shows that were there to educate people as they came into the children's zoo. I eventually worked my way into working with primates because I had a true love for monkeys and apes. So I ended up working in the primate reserve there. And if you've ever known somebody who's a real animal person, oftentimes animal people aren't necessarily people. So many of the other zookeepers that were there and the other animal trainers really had a passion for working with their animals, but not necessarily for doing public talks or working with school groups. But I just had a love for it right from the start. So I kind of became the default educator of our team. So anytime a school group came, I was the first person to volunteer. I did keeper talks every day with the public and just really loved that portion of my job. But I didn't really still think about, I loved zookeeping. I loved conservation. That was always in my heart. And I didn't really think about teaching until when I was working as a zookeeper. You would spend part of the year working, taking care of your animals, giving them the best life that you can, but you would spend the other part of the year working on research and conservation projects for the conservation of the particular animals that you specialized in. That way you could learn the skills of what is it like where they live, bring back a lot of those ideas to make the lives better of the animals you have. But I also worked on reintroducing animals that were born in captivity and releasing them back into the wild. So there was a period of time I was working in Madagascar. I was there for almost 6 months. And while I was there, it was like my dream job. I was there, I was in the jungles of Madagascar, releasing these lemurs that we had raised and tracking them every day, making sure they were doing well and were they interacting with other lemurs and tracking what they ate. And I noticed on my walk in and out of the forest every day, I would walk by a school and there would be students, and they would always just be hanging out outside the school with no adults around. And these were kids anywhere from 4 years old to about 12 or 13. And every day I walked by, there was never a teacher there. So finally, after a couple of weeks, I started asking around, and I was told there had been a governmental coup about 4 months before that, because Madagascar, unfortunately, is a very unstable government. And the teachers were no longer getting paid. So they had stopped coming, but the students didn't know what to do. So every day they just came hoping that their teacher would come. And they were so friendly and so excited to see me every day when I would walk by that I started stopping and talking to them and playing their little games that they had. They would collect, whatever objects, even if it was just rocks or pebbles, and they come up with these intricate games that they would do. So I started talking to them every day, and I realized, I had a couple extra hours after my shift in the forest coming out. So I would stop, and the school was not locked. It wasn't anything, it was an open air classroom in the tropics. So I started going into the school, and then before you knew it, I was developing all of these little lesson plans that we would do and teaching them about lemurs in the forest. Malaria was a huge problem there. There were several people that were coming down with malaria while I was there in my village. I actually also came down with malaria during the time that I was there. So I started creating these games out of the games that they had taught me. I altered them and made them into games to understanding how to clean up standing water, and that would get rid of mosquitoes. And then, therefore, you wouldn't have as much malaria. So, long story short, I started creating these lesson plans, not even realizing that that's what I was doing. And for the last couple of months I was there, I almost looked at going in and monitoring and tracking the lemurs as a side thing I had to do to get it out of the way so I could just get to the school. The whole time I was there watching lemurs, my brain started going towards, oh, what could I do today? What am I going to do tomorrow with the students? What would be a good way to alter something and do something a little different that they would enjoy? So I think I realized that my dream job, while it was amazing to find this passion that I had, the one thing that was even better than that was getting other people to love that thing that I loved. Getting them inspired to really be invested in it as well was even better than loving it just on my own.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. How much
Yeah.
time were you in Madagascar?
So I was there just under 6 months. So the project that I worked on, I was there for about 4.5 months. And then I spent like 5 weeks after that just traveling on my own to get around the island. Because the conservation project I was working on, I flew right in, and then I was just in this remote village. When I say a remote village, it was you drove as far as you could until the road disappeared, and then you hiked for another 3 hours, and you lived in a village that had about 5 grass huts in a circle,
Mhm.
that was right on the edge of the reserve, and it's an isolated reserve. It's not a reserve that's open to the public for conservation reasons to try and keep people out from coming in and either poaching or harvesting from that area. So, I only saw one small section, so then I spent a couple weeks after that traveling around, but I worked on many other projects while I was there, and all of them always had a conservation focus. That was always the zoo's focus, was not just to take care of animals in a zoo. It was the goal is to raise money to bring it back to those areas, to preserve those areas or reintroduce animals back to the wild. So I also worked on reintroduction projects in Brazil, South Africa, and Central China
So
as
how
well.
much time passed between you thought you were about to go to graduate school to be an optometrist to I'm going to travel the world and I'm actually going to go be a teacher?
Yeah, I would say that was probably about an 8-year period. So it was a period of time from when, yeah, I kind of turned away and said, well, let me try something different, and found this conservation love that I had. That would have been, yeah, I would say just about 8 years or so. But then it was within a year of coming back from Madagascar. I really knew coming back out of that experience what my next step was going to be.
So with
Um,
the range of experience you had during this 8-year period,
yeah.
how do you think that benefits you now as a teacher and shaped your approach to teaching in a way that it might not have affected people that didn't have that experience?
Yeah, because the way I came into it, just in the example that I gave you, I would walk by and I'd see these children there, and they were just making up games and playing games and just observing what they were doing with each other, and watching and learning from them brought me into their world of the things that they already knew and the way that they interacted with each other. So then I could join in on their game as well, and then bring in my own piece to it to then turn it into like an anti-malarial, game as an education game. That game actually is a game that I brought back. and I've adapted it and we use it in some of my classes. For you can adapt it to any other topic. So I took this game that these kids, they'll never know, but they taught me this really cool game that now I brought back and I do it in our classrooms here. I've also worked at Yale through the Peabody Fellows program and do a lot of teacher training and curriculum in the summers. And I did that for a little over 10 years. And I brought that game to some of the Yale graduate students that are there, and they actually have adapted that game to some of their kits that they have that have been nationally disseminated in certain curriculum that we've developed there. So, in watching the way that they interacted with each other, and then entering their world to bring my piece to it, rather than kind of presenting a world to them, has been a really neat kind of aspect to take.
Was there a language barrier as you were working with the students?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like the
So
games were a way to communicate in some way.
yeah, absolutely. So I am not bilingual. It's like the one thing I wish I were. In Madagascar, they speak they speak French because they used to be a territory of France. However, out in the bush, nobody speaks French. It's all Malagash, and every village has a different dialect. So while I brushed up on my French, tried to learn as much as I could, once I got there, I actually used pretty much no French because it was only Malagash. So I picked up a little bit of local dialect so I could have some basic conversation with them. But it was definitely limited. I had another research assistant that was with me who was Malagash, who was from the local area. I was the only outsider that came in to work on this project. Everybody else was locally hired. So they would help me a little bit with the translation, but for sure there was a language barrier. So games was my entry in. You can figure out everything you need to know by watching people within a game, right? You don't need somebody to really explain. When you sit down to a card game, they can explain it to you, but they might as well just play the game and you watch, you'll get it a lot better. So that was really helpful.
Oh, my 8th grade science teacher used to say, "A picture's worth 1,000 words, a demo's worth a million."
Wow, that's because science teachers are the best. That's a
Yes,
good one.
that's it. That's it. So, Vicky, one question I ask all incoming teachers to the Branford Public Schools is, who is the best teacher you ever had? And for some reason, that's something that everyone shares. They can remember a best teacher. Can you recall yours?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people that pop into my mind. One is a teacher, and one actually is my former employer, who is a curator at the zoo, in learning how to interact with people in a very positive way to create a team that really fosters everybody's strengths to work together. I've learned a lot by Dr. Andy Baker, who was my former curator at the zoo. But when I think back to school and when I was sitting in school, I think back to elementary school, and I was the kid that was labeled as the daydreamer. I was the kid that you couldn't sit me next to the window because all I would do is stare out the window, and I wasn't not paying attention, but I was always just really interested in what was happening in the tree outside. What was the squirrel doing? Who was I just was interested in anything that was happening outside. I could listen, but the teachers always thought I was the daydreamer. So, oftentimes, they wouldn't allow me to sit at the window. I had to sit next to the sink because the sink is always on an interior wall, right? You don't have the sinks on the outside, so they would always put me in the back corner all the way inside so I'd be away from the window. Except one teacher that I had, Mrs. Tilka. So, she would notice how much I wanted to just be outside and look at things that were outside. So anytime that we could, if we were doing any sort of reading or circle time, she started taking us outside. And I think she must have noticed that I can clearly remember being under that tree, being on our nap time or blankets that we had because she still, it must have been early. I think that must have been first grade, and sitting on it, and I was always when I picture I'm in the middle of the group of students and my hand is up and I'm totally into the book, but just felt like the environment of being under that tree and being outside allowed me to just relax and really feel comfortable and focused. So I I thank her because when I look back at that, I realize how important the environment of the classroom is. And then that environment could be outside, could be inside, could be something about the way that it's organized. It doesn't have to be like a perfectly organized classroom, but there has to be something that feels really comfortable and really safe in order for you to engage with the group. When I was inside sitting by the window, I was listening. I knew everything going on, but I was not engaging in conversation. or really involved in that. But when you put me in the right environment, I I just came out of my shell. So I think back on that and thank her for noticing.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love about this question is I don't think I've ever asked the question when someone couldn't, one, instantly recall a person or several people. Two, they have a specific, like, anecdote and story that goes with it, and the third part is they remember how the person made them feel, like it's part of the story, and that it's amazing that it's so formulaic. So if you're listening, uh, think about who was the best teacher you ever had or a teacher you'll never forget, and if they're still around, please reach out to them, drop them a note because it's a life-changing thing for them. So reach out if you know how to get a hold of them.
Can I ask you for your story?
Yes, and it's
Yeah.
funny as I ask it and as I was just asking in some interviews I had today, mine is Mrs. McDonald. She was my 5th grade teacher, and it was a time in my life where my, mom was getting divorced, and I was having a very hard time socially, and she was just not getting me, we were not clicking. And, a few months into the school year, I went in and I was clearly upset and I asked to speak to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor wasn't there that day. And Mrs. McDonald said, "Is there anything you want to talk to me about?" And I said, "No," because I didn't feel safe talking to her. But what she did do as I went out and to PE class, and about 30 minutes later, she came out to the field and pulled me in and she called the guidance counselor to come back over to talk to me. And I kind of unloaded on the guidance counselor, and then she talked to Mrs. McDonald, and it changed my relationship with Mrs. McDonald for the better, to the point where we were just so close, and she just saw me in a way that she didn't know she needed to see me before because she didn't know who I was, and so it opened something up. My tradition is every year around Teacher Appreciation Month, I think about a teacher who's still around that made a difference, and this doesn't always have to be a traditional teacher like you had someone from when you were working in the zoo
Yeah.
that stood out, is I try to think of somebody who I can drop a message to let them know they made a difference. And one year, I said I really need to reach out to Mrs. McDonald, and I knew she had retired, but I also knew that my aunt worked in my middle school that I attended and could potentially get her address, and she did. And I wrote to her, and then within a week, the letter's actually behind you right there. I keep it; it's right out in an envelope.
Oh,
Uh,
that's great.
yeah, she wrote back to me, and she wrote back with, like I mentioned, like, the very specific stories and feelings of having that connection at that time, and it's just really amazing that it's not always about who is the best, like, technical teacher and pedagogue and who taught me the most of name the content area. It's like, who saw me for who I am, who made me feel safe and welcome in their classroom, and as a result, who am I never gonna forget? And those end up being the best teachers we've ever had.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, when I think back to even my story I had, I can picture the tree. I can picture, exactly where I was sitting, my hand up, asking questions. I don't know what the book was. I don't remember what the book was, but I can clearly remember Mrs. Tilka. I can remember everything about that situation. So,
Yeah, and I'm probably not gonna get this quote right. It's the Maya Angelou quote of, "People may not remember what you said, may not remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel."
yeah.
And when we think about those best teachers in our life, it's the feelings are what we remember.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and the less sophisticated version of it, Ina Garten, if you're a Food Network person, she's the Barefoot Contessa. She says people always remember dessert. They might not remember the rest of dinner, but they always remember dessert, and because dessert makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah, power of sugar.
Right.
Yep. So my next question is about some of the challenges that we face in education today. It's not uncommon for people to say kids are just different than they used to be. So I'm wondering, do you agree with that statement? Are kids different? And if so, are we doing things in a different way in order to meet those needs? Or should we be doing things different than we are in order to uh, make school a place where more students can be successful?
Well, it's a difficult question because I think it's multi-layered, right? So, are first of all, are students different than they used to be? Yes and no. I mean, if you have your normal interactions with, I work mostly with teenagers, so I'm going to talk kind of from my perspective. Oftentimes, people say it's very different to try and have a conversation with a teenager or people in the community. When I talk to them, if they don't get to interact with teenagers a lot, they ask like, what are they really like? Are they just on their phones all the time? Like, how do they interact with each other? Now, they Definitely, on the surface, communicate differently, right? They certainly communicate much more through either not even necessarily texting, but snapping and through a media. But when you remove that media away, you'd be surprised at how quickly they really kind of go back to exactly what you remember interacting with, like when you were a teenager. When we started with the Yonder pouches this year, right? So students did not have access to their phones or social media through the day. You would be surprised at how quickly our lunchroom, the volume level in our lunchroom went right back up. I didn't even really realize how quiet our lunchroom was until we didn't have the phones, and everybody really started to congregate together around tables. So instead of having 3 or 4 kids spread out at a table, oftentimes just looking at their phones during lunch and kinda taking what they were thinking was a mental break. Actually, once we got rid of that, they started to really, congregate in larger groups around tables. They were trying to squeeze 10 people in at a table, and they're, like, half hanging off the bench because they all wanted to sit together and to talk so much more. You walk by, we have a balcony area in Branford High School where the senior lockers are, and we expanded and it opens. There's we call it the senior, balcony, but it's a lounge area that has couches and things, and we expanded that. And all of a sudden you look and they're just finding things and they're making up games and they're playing games with each other and they're having fun and they're laughing and then they're noticing everybody who walks by and they're saying hi to every teacher as they walk by, where before they wouldn't have even known somebody had walked by. So it's while on the outside because of the distractions, it does feel like they're very different. Underneath, really, it's very much the same. When you remove that, all of that social communication still comes out in their personality and their ability to talk to each other.
What about for the access to information? So you think about once upon a time, you had to actually look something up and work for it a little bit, and now it's much faster and you can get different media to answer the question. Has that affected how you have to think about how a lesson is designed and keeping students engaged?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it does take away, to get to anything that's a long term learning section of your brain, you really need to, first of all, have the right environment that is there. But you also need to physically grab attention as well. Where before, if you had to look something up, you had to figure out, oh, what book do I need? You had to thumb to the index in the back, look it up. There was a tactile portion to that of not only waiting for the information, but actually using your body, and a physical component of movement that, brought you to your answer. And because it is so quick to get the answer and it's all right within, I mean, the only thing you really need to move is a couple of thumbs and that's it, and you can have your answer almost instantaneously. You're skipping over that portion that allows things to have a connection to your thoughts and your processes. So in losing that, you're losing an encoding portion that needs to take place in order to get from a short-term memory, which has about 5 to 7 slots at a time, to jump into anything that's long-term memory. You need to have that encoding process. So now a lot of the information you look up is not something that you necessarily need to have in your long-term memory, right? So knowing and understanding how to find quick information that you only need on a temporary basis, they're really, really good at that, right? Because they know exactly how to quickly find things in technology. But it is a little bit of a challenge because you're losing that other ability to find, to encode and connect things to your prior knowledge in order to hang on to information a little bit longer. So understanding that that is a little bit of a gap and a difference that you have now, I think teachers really need to we've really had to adapt to that, to the way that our classroom is run. So it is, you walk into a lot of classrooms now and it doesn't look like a classroom that you had. It's table groups or circles even completely. It's not necessarily, desks that are in a row for students to sit and take PowerPoint notes. I mean, there is some direct instruction that occurs to give them some information, but that's pretty limited. It's now really set up for group working and under having conversations and bouncing ideas off of each other to then bring learning forward together in groups. So it looks a little different.
That's great.
Did that answer your
Yeah,
question?
really well,
Yeah.
especially
Okay.
shout out to cognitive load theory because that's what you were talking about.
Wow.
I think about it quite a bit, especially what's kind of tied to this is the idea of multitasking. And it's why I always go on tangents about screens because you're not really multitasking because your short term memory can't hold all of the things. So it's not making its way into working memory and then long term memory
Yeah.
because your brain can't handle that many things at a time. You have
Yeah.
to focus. What would your advice be to a student or even an adult who is considering a career change in education but isn't sure if it's the right path for them?
Well, my daughter is just finishing her first year as a second grade teacher. So this has been definitely something I've had a lot of personal experience with. When she went to college, she's now 22, but when she first went, she thought she knew she loved children, but she thought maybe she wanted to go into pediatrics or something medically related. And then she realized, a little bit later and didn't even tell me that she changed her major halfway through her sophomore year to education. She didn't tell me until after she had already kinda switched everything over, so it wasn't anything that, I had talked to her about. She switched it and then came to me and said, "Well, what do you think?" I did this because it felt like it was the right thing to do. I felt this draw to wanna work with children and really make a difference, and I was so excited that she had kind of found it on her own and had come around to that. So she's just finishing her first year of teaching, which is tough. I mean, it is. It's very different. You're coming in your first year. Second grade is a busy grade. I mean, hats off to the elementary and the middle school teachers. As a high school teacher, it's a little bit of a different world. If you're thinking about it, that's because there's something inside of you that's drawing you to this profession. It is definitely I shouldn't even call it a profession, it's a calling,
Mhm.
right? I firsthand experience for that. I never thought I was gonna be a teacher when I was in college, and the calling hit me little by little. It nudged me as I worked at the zoo, and then it hit me like a train when I was in Madagascar. That when I came back, I knew that that was really where I was supposed to be. So if you have something inside of you that's really leading you in that direction, that's because it's a calling. Like, there's the reason that you're thinking about that. So, for sure, a telltale sign that this is the right profession
Oh,
for you.
that's great. So, Vicky, we are very excited you are Educator of the Year. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience has been like?
It's been wonderful. Yeah, it's such an honor to be, first of all, nominated, but then named as Teacher of the Year for the Branford Public School System. This is the first year that we've done it in quite a long time, so it was a new process for us this year. So it was really fun to kind of work through the process with the administration, as well as now be on the committee to choose the future Teacher of the Year as well. So it's great to see how the process works. I was very humbled for sure, but then when I really reflected upon, why me? Because you look around this district, and this district is loaded with talented, dedicated individuals. And really, I've never taught any place besides Branford High School. It's the only place I've ever taught. I went from being at the zoo, I went through the ARC program, I got my teaching certification, and was drawn to Branford because they had an alternative program, and I wanted to work with alternative teenagers, alternative education. So I was drawn to Branford originally for that reason, but because I've never taught anyplace else, I only know Branford. Everything that I do in my classroom and everything that I am is just a product of watching the other teachers that are around me. Just seeing what's going on down the hall. How does that work? I look at, some students you click with right away and some you don't. I mean, it's that way for everybody. So looking at a student that maybe at first I'm having trouble kind of really drawing that true connection with, you find a teacher that they are drawing that connection with and figure out what is happening in that classroom that's working for them. And you start to borrow all these little pieces of brilliance that are happening around you and try it on. It's like trying on a different shirt. Let's try that on. Let's see if that works for me and works for my classroom environment. And you do that I mean, you're surrounded by wonderful teachers, so you do it from every direction. Every time you're sitting in a meeting, you're listening, you're observing, you're understanding different people's points of view, how they work, and you're borrowing all of those things whether you realize it or not. So everything that I am and that I do is Brantford. It's everything that I've gotten from the teachers around me. So I feel as though it's wonderful and to be nominated and then be the first in a while, the first teacher of the year. But honestly, it's not really my honor. It's everybody that I've worked with because that's all I really am is little pieces of everybody else.
That's right. I think you're representing all of us well. And I think we need to coin this borrow the brilliance. That sounds
Yeah.
like a good slogan for us. So last question. When you hear that age old question of what do you want to be when you grow up, how do you think differently about that question now than you may have as either a kid or a student yourself?
Sure. I mean, I think that that question is always a loaded question because oftentimes we change through our lives and our priorities change and the things that we find that we love change over time. So, and think instead of, what do you want to be? It's who do you want to be? Not the what, it's the who. Right. And then that's what you bring forward into no matter what your profession is, whether you're a teacher, whether you own your own business, whether you work in an office, a medical, anything that you're doing, as long as you're bringing the best of you forward, then that's the right place for you to be in.
That's a perfect place to end, especially as we're sending our seniors off into the world who they don't all know the what, but the who is something that they could define more and think about and find some direction. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure to welcome Ginger Fitzpatrick to the podcast. Welcome, Ginger.
Hi.
So to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your high school experience? What have been like the activities that you participated in during your time?
Yeah, I definitely did a lot of the arts. For all 4 years, I did the play, the fall play, which was great. And then my sophomore and junior year, I did the musical. Definitely spent a lot of my time in the art wing doing art club, young women's club, pretty
Awesome.
much it.
So you are strongly considering education as your major
Yeah.
as you're going to college. Can you tell us about where you're going to school next year and why is education a likely path for you at the moment?
So I chose URI, University of Rhode Island. I'm super excited. I actually talked to some education majors at URI, connected on Instagram and such, and they're super excited. They know a little bit more about I do. I'm going in undecided, but they talked to me about it, and I'm super pumped to explore that. Why I want to go into education, I think I've always kind of had a little bit of a natural curiosity, especially regarding like the arts and art history and stuff. And I've seen what teachers how what impact they make, and I think that's definitely inspired me to consider it.
And I know you are doing your internship now
Yeah.
at Tisco. Has that experience made you more likely to want to go into education?
Absolutely, it's been great. I've Misty Nicola, she's my art teacher, that's who I'm doing it with, and she's fabulous. She like, seeing these kids so excited to go to the art room, it just you can really see what the environment's like, the interactions, it's great, yeah.
So when you mentioned teachers that you've had along the way, and often when you ask people like who's a teacher that really made a difference, do you have certain teachers you've had during your time in Branford that you want to give a shout out to that just really have
Definitely.
helped shape the kind of who you are?
Like, honestly, all of my elementary school teachers, I can think of, like, Mr. L, Miss Benatti, Miss DiNicola, of course, and then recently, definitely Miss Krapanicki, she's my art teacher that I took, like, so many classes with, and then Miss Clymey, Mr. Miller. Miss Clymey is funny, she's my science teacher, and she's, like, so smart. I love listening to her lectures and such, and I never was, like, considering, like, science or anything, like, I kinda just, like, took it to take it. But then I took her anatomy and physiology class my junior year, and I was really intrigued. It was really interesting. It's her turning point regarding, like, STEM and such.
That's neat. That's a good tie into Miss Climby because she's the other guest on this episode.
Yeah.
She's our teacher of the year.
Oh.
So what excites you most about the possibility of becoming a teacher and working in education?
Um, I'd say, like, just the impact you can make on kids, like, even in my internship, like, I'm not, like I don't have an education degree or anything, but, like, seeing how excited they are to see you. It's like the energy you put in is the energy you get back, and that's what I've noticed with kids and being in this internship. And I can also see that reflected in Miss Cola, like, it's really cool to see what you could be and do in education.
Yeah, that's a great reflection early on. So what do you think students need today from teachers? Because it's sometimes it's not just the content that they're teaching. There's a lot more that goes into it.
I think kids, they need a lot of motivation. I think some kids, especially, like, at least in the high school, think, "Oh, like, there's so many tools at our disposal," and sometimes it's, like, a bit detrimental, in my opinion, of, like, motivation and to do their work.
Yeah, it's a good reframe of the question is so AI it's kind of here and it's staying here.
Yeah.
And we need teachers because they do something that AI
Yeah.
can't do.
And
Can,
if
can
yeah,
you put your finger on like what is the thing that teachers bring to the table that AI doesn't?
I think just like individuality in work, and I think that a teacher can really inspire a kid to do their own work and make it their own, and especially regarding I'm thinking of the arts and such, and, like, it's really we kind of need it going into this, like, because AI is so new, we don't really know what's happening. Most people don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking about art as you were talking because
Yeah.
there's I don't know if scary is the right word, but it's kind of fascinating
Yeah.
how quickly AI is able to it feels like creating, but it's not really creating.
Yeah.
It's a recreation. It's very iterative,
Yeah.
and it's never going to be original because AI is not an artist. It's taking all of the other art.
Exactly. It's just pulling from other sources, and
Yes.
it's obviously AI is soulless, especially when I see it in the fine arts.
Mhm.
And I think that especially work in like arts English teachers, I think they have a really big I think they have power to empower kids.
So some people see education as a challenging profession right now. What makes you optimistic enough to choose this as your pathway now?
I know I'm thinking about elementary education, and at such a young age, every kid is so impressionable, and if I can go into education and even, like, not even just elementary, but in the high school level, intermediate level, and, of course, lower, like, pre-K and whatnot. I think every teacher has the power to connect with students and alter what their future looks like and inspire them to do what they might be afraid to do, what they might feel pressure not to do and such, but and they I think teachers have the power, and I've seen it with a lot of my teachers, and that's definitely what motivates me.
That's exciting. So you're going in undecided, and I'm just wondering because you're undecided, are a lot of people asking you this question of like, what do you want to do? Are you feeling pressure? Are you feeling like you have the space and grace to take your time?
I feel like at first when I clicked, undecided on the little comment app, I was like, that's not because I feel like everyone has their path set out for them, but I was actually at the Accepted Students Day for URI, and the head of the Fannin Institute of Success, which is the undecided program, and you explore it's great. He was like, "Yeah, not a lot of people go into this program, but so like over half of people that even if they're declared, they switch." And I think even though I don't have that, "Oh, I wanna do this right now," I know by like my sophomore year or the end of my freshman year, I get to explore these paths and even apply that to education. "Oh, I really like STEM, maybe I could become a STEM teacher." Arts, I'm obviously more into the arts, but I can become an art teacher, and I think at first it was intimidating, but now I'm pretty steadfast in my decision.
Great. So how do you answer the question right now when someone asks you, uh, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I do say like an educator, like a teacher. I'm pretty like I'll probably be a teacher. And I'm super excited to at least like explore, you know, maybe like later on become a teacher. I don't know. I think it's just something that intrigues me while I am still undecided. I think that like that's my answer.
So if we rewind to Ginger 10 years ago as a student at Tisco, and someone asked you that question then, do you remember what your answer used to be when
Oh,
you were
pop
looking?
singer.
A pop singer? Of
A Lady
course.
Gaga, of
Yes,
course.
of course, of course, of course. All right, Ginger. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your story, and we wish you the best of luck at
Thank you
URI.
so much, Dr. Tranberg.
As we wrap up this episode of Hive Mind Headlines, we hope today's conversation encouraged you to think a little differently about education, not just as a profession, but a calling, a pathway, and a chance to make a lasting impact on the lives of others. Whether you're a student figuring out what comes next, an educator already walking this path, or someone reflecting on the people who shaped your own journey, maybe the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, is really less about a job title and more about the kind of difference you hope to make in the world. A huge thank you to our guests for sharing their stories, perspectives, and passion for education. And thank you to all of you for listening and being part of the conversation. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend or colleague, and join us next time for another episode of Hive Mind Headlines. Until next time, stay hive-minded.